If you haven't already checked out Brian's quick take of the 2022 BMW 230i, be sure and check that out. In this video, we're going to be talking about pricing and comparisons and the changes for the 2 Series for 2023. Yes, even though this has only been on sale for 1 year in the United States, BMW has already made a significant change on the inside. The 2 Series for 2023 is now going to have BMW's iDrive version 8. This has been somewhat controversial. Not everybody is a fan of the way iDrive 8 looks. I happen to be a fan of it, however. I like the look of it. I also like the functionality. This is one of the first systems to support multi-screen Apple CarPlay, 2 screens to be specific. You can actually have the Apple Maps navigating you on the instrument cluster while something else is being driven by CarPlay on the infotainment system. This has also caused a slight reworking of some of the dashboard buttons, but the bulk of the 2 Series is essentially the same. The big thing you'll notice is just the curved display around the interior, which we do not find for some reason on the 4 Series Coupe for 2023. It appears that some of the supply shortages and chip shortages is causing BMW to roll out the iDrive update a little bit more slowly than they'd planned. So you will find iDrive 8 on things like the BMW iX, the new i4, which is a 4 Series Grand Coupe essentially, and now the 2 Series as well. For 2023, that 230i is going to start at $37,400, a little bit more expensive than last year, but still about $10,000 less than the BMW 4 Series. The M240i, that's the model with the 3-liter turbo, that's going to be about $10,000 less as well, but it's going to start obviously more than the 230i at $47,900. So pretty decent bump up to get that extra power. Both of these models come standard with rear-wheel drive, all-wheel drive is optional, and the manual transmission is the only way to go. As we roll through the options, you should know that on all versions of the 2 Series, optional paint colors are $650, and that's for the vast majority of colors you'll find there. Also, there are a ton of different options available, standalone wheel options, things like that, and those can get somewhat pricey. There are no less than 7 wheel options for the 230i alone. Let's talk about what I would get if I were shopping for a 230i. First, I would get one of the optional paint colors because I would want something other than white. I would also skip the all-wheel drive option. I think the 230i is more fun rear-wheel drive. There's a convenience package available for $1,500 that gives you the moonroof, some slightly different trim inside, keyless access, auto high beams, and ambient lighting. I wouldn't get that option because I would get the premium package, which includes all of that and the adaptive LED steering headlights, heads-up display, heated seats and heated steering wheel, those are not standard, and the universal garage door opener, also oddly not standard. I would also get the dynamic handling pack. That's $1,900. Some folks might want to skip this, but if you're getting a rear-wheel drive 2 Series, I would recommend it. This gives you the upgraded M Sport brakes and the M Sport differential. That's BMW speak for torque vectoring and limited slip functionality. Yes, the onboard stability and traction control will clamp the brakes down on one wheel or the other if you're out in wet weather or snowy weather, etc. But if you are thinking of getting a rear-wheel drive 2 Series, I highly recommend this option. It's certainly going to make it feel more fun and feel more stable both. I would also get adaptive cruise control. It's a $550 option. The driver's side lumbar support, $175, that is not standard, and the Harman Kardon audio system for $875. That would bring my personal choice for the 230i up to $46,395 after the destination charge. Now, on the M240i, I would get all-wheel drive. That is a $2,000 option, but it is certainly going to help harness the power of that 3-liter turbo, and it is going to give you the fastest 0 to 60 times, even though it's going to add a bit of weight. If you're already spending this much on your new car, I would also recommend getting the optional leather interior. You get imitation leather base, optional leather for about $1,500 depending on the color. I would get the red color, I think. The $1,950 premium pack is also an option that I would get. It's a little bit more expensive on the 230i because it has less standard equipment than on the M240i. That's the price difference there. I would also get the same adaptive cruise control, lumbar support, and upgraded audio. I would, however, skip the optional cooling and tire package unless you plan on tracking your M240i. The standard systems are pretty decent, and for the price of that, you could upgrade the tires yourself aftermarket. That brings my personal choice for the M240i up to $55,600. Now let's talk about how those price points compare against the competition. Although, I should say that the BMW 4 Series is probably the closest competitor here, so let's talk about that first. The 2 Series and 4 Series are closely related. They're built on the same BMW platform. The 2 Series is just a slightly shrunken version of the 4 Series, and the difference is not enormous. The 2 Series has about 2 inches less combined legroom and about 2 cubic feet less cargo capacity, so not a great deal of difference there. Oddly enough, because of the proportions, the interior ends up being a little bit wider and you get a little bit more front headroom in the 2 Series, although you get a little bit less rear headroom in the 2 Series versus the 4 Series. Because these two vehicles are so closely related, their curb weights are shockingly similar. The 2 Series is a little bit lighter, but we're talking about a very small amount, about 50 to 60 pounds lighter in the 230i version, about 100 pounds lighter in the M240i versus the M440i in the 4 Series lineup. That's mainly because the structure of the vehicle doesn't change greatly. We still have the same crash structures up front, same engine, same transmission, and the slight reduction in the cabin size doesn't really lead to much of a weight savings. Although the 2 Series does feel lighter and more nimble, it's not actually lighter. A lot of that simply has to do with the change in driver position relative to the wheelbase and the fact that the entire vehicle is a little bit shorter than the 4 Series. It helps it feel just a little bit more dynamic out on the road. The 4 Series, it's also tuned to be a little bit more grown up, perhaps a little bit more of a GT style vehicle, whereas the 2 Series designed to be a little bit more fun. If you're not a big fan of BMW's bucktooth beaver look, then you want to get the 2 Series. Also, if you want to save about $10,000, you want to get the 2 Series. To be honest, when you park these two vehicles next to each other, I like the look of the 2 Series a bit better, and I like the proportions of it a little better as well. It has a truncated trunk look and that really long hood proportion that I find attractive. But if you want something that's a little bit more classically elegant, that might be the 4 Series, with the exception of the beaver-like front grille that not everybody's a fan of. Although I agree that the 4 Series is a bit toothy, my big reason to get the 2 Series is simply because it's $10,000 less and you get a very similar feel. The interior look is going to be different because the 4 Series does not yet get the upgraded infotainment system from BMW. So it has a more traditional set in the dash instrument cluster and the infotainment system that's perched on top of the dash rather than the 2-screen curved setup that we find in the iDrive 8 setup. However, that's really more of a personal preference. Now let's move on to the competition here. The BMW 2 Series is designed as an entry point into the BMW brand, so you might be looking at this as an upgrade from something like a Supra, which is also a BMW, or something like a Nissan Z, or perhaps a Camaro or a Mustang or something along those lines. So let's take a look at the Nissan Z first. They are quite similar priced when you really start to look at this. The Z starts at $39,990, so technically a little bit more than the 230i, but you do get that 400 horsepower twin-turbo V6 engine standard. Compared to the Nissan Z, I think the 2 Series is really well priced, although the Nissan Z is very well priced in its own right. $39,990 gets you 400 horsepower standard. You can get a manual transmission if you want one, or a 9-speed automatic. The 9-speed automatic in the Nissan Z is essentially a Mercedes transmission. It's not as smooth shifting as the ZF that BMW uses, but does have a solid pedigree to it. If you want the performance package, which gives you the limited slip differential and a bunch of other things, but no extra power in the Nissan Z, that's going to be a lot more expensive, $49,990. That's pretty darn close to a rear-wheel drive M240i. Now, you are going to get, on paper, more horsepower in the Nissan Z, but not necessarily faster 0 to 60, because when Nissan says 400 horsepower, they're right on there at 400 horsepower. But BMW, as we all know, tends to underrate their engines, so the 230i posts really good performance numbers, even though it has a lot less power. And the M240i, again, even though not 400 horsepower, it's still going to perform very, very well compared against that Nissan Z. Now, the big deal, of course, is that these are not the same kind of vehicle. One is a 2+2 coupe, the other one is a 2-seat coupe only. And if you're looking for a manual transmission, you're only going to find that on the Nissan Z at the moment. No manual transmission available on the 2 Series. If I were shopping between these two vehicles, I would say a lot of it comes down to styling. How much do you need that back seat? How much are you interested in the practicality of a liftback versus a real trunk like we find on the 2 Series? If this were my own money on the line, I would buy the 2 Series. The interior is more refined, the infotainment system and the electronics are more refined in the BMW. It doesn't have the same sort of raw and fun experience that we find in the Z. I do think the Z is more fun, but I think that I would buy the 2 Series because it comes across as more refined, and I think I like the styling a bit better as well. Now let's take a look at the Audi lineup. Audi theoretically has two vehicles that you might want to cross-shop against the 2 Series, one based on price and one based on form factor. The Audi TT is the coupe that's relatively similarly sized to the 2 Series, but it is definitely more expensive. It's priced a little bit more like a 4 Series, even though size-wise it's closer to the 2 Series. $50,500 buys you the absolute base version of the Audi TT. That's pretty expensive when you compare it against the 2 Series lineup, and then even more expensive when you start taking a look under the hood, because that gets you 228 horsepower in the Audi. If you want 288 horsepower in the Audi, that's $60,200. If you want 394 horsepower in the Audi, that's a whopping $73,200. Just as far as starting price goes. So it's definitely in a different price category. It's also a different kind of handling when we're talking about the TT. It is an absolute blast to drive, but it is still a front-wheel drive based vehicle. So it has a transverse engine, and then it has an all-wheel drive system that tries to really mask the front-wheel drive tendencies of the vehicle, but it's never going to handle quite like the purity that we find in the 2 Series, especially the rear-wheel drive models of the 2 Series. And that's why we find all-wheel drive standard on the performance versions of that platform in the Audi lineup, because they really need the ability to send power to the rear to keep it from overwhelming the front wheels. Related to the TT, kind of sort of, is the Audi S3 and the Audi RS3. Now, these are very different vehicles as well because they're 4-door vehicles, but they are in the same price range as the 2 Series. The S3 starts at $45,900 and the RS3 at $58,900. Now, at the moment, we don't have a full-on M version of the 2 Series. That might be the better corollary to the RS3 in the Audi lineup, but the RS3 is pretty well priced. I would buy a base RS3 at $58,900 over a lightly optioned BMW M240i. It is just so much fun. The all-wheel drive system is absolutely epic. The noise from the 5-cylinder engine is great. The performance is incredible as well. It is just a heap of fun, but it's not quite the same thing. Let me know what you think about that down there in the comment section. Perhaps a little bit closer to the same thing is the Chevy Camaro. And this may sound odd because Chevy's not a luxury brand and BMW obviously is, but the reason for the Camaro being here is that the ATS Coupe no longer exists, and the Cadillac ATS and the Camaro are brothers from another mother. They're very, very closely related. They ride on the same platform, and that's really obvious when you drive the Camaro out on the road. The Camaro theoretically is supposed to compete with the Challenger and the Ford Mustang, but behind the wheel, it drives more like a BMW than either of those options because it's based on that small Cadillac. So even though you can get a 6.2-liter V8 engine or a supercharged V8 under the hood of your Camaro, the way that it feels, the way that it drives out on the road feels more Germanic than something like the Nissan Z or the Audi TT, etc. The Camaro is a lot of fun to drive, but the interior is frankly pretty cheap. If I were shopping for one, I would probably get the 6.2-liter V8 engine. That's the best way to get the Camaro, and price-wise, that's going to be pretty similar to the models of 2 Series that I've talked about. Putting this in perspective, the 3LT trim of the Camaro, which is definitely several steps above the base model, is about $34,600 with the V6 engine. And it's only a little bit more to get the 6.2-liter V8. Definitely well within the price range of the M240i. Only you're going to get a lot more power, you're going to get a V8 engine, the option of a manual transmission, and a pretty decent 10-speed automatic transmission as well. The General Motors 10-speed is not quite as smooth as the ZF 8-speed, but it is pretty good, and I like the 10-speed a little bit more than the 9-speed that we find in the Nissan Z. The big problem for the Camaro continues to be its interior. The styling is pretty polarizing. The parts are definitely less expensive feeling than in the 2 Series. That's because the base model is pretty inexpensive. And then even when you work your way on up into the upper level trims, the parts quality, the screen sizes, etc., they just feel behind their times. No one's quite sure when we're going to get a new Camaro or exactly what that new Camaro might be, but this Camaro is not aging as well as I might have liked on the inside. Also, it has a really high sill, so the windows are pretty high up and pretty squished, and that leads to the feeling that you're sitting inside your dad's car, which not everybody is a fan of. I'm not the smallest person out there, but driving the Camaro definitely makes you feel smaller than you are because of that really truncated greenhouse feel. If you're a fan of that, if you're a fan of the higher sills for style, then obviously the Camaro is going to be great for you. But if you do like greater visibility, a greater sense of airiness and openness, you might want to look somewhere else. There's a lot of black plastic going on in there. Some might see the 2 Series as awkwardly positioned in the BMW lineup, sandwiched between the Z4 and the 4 Series and the ton of other 2-door and coupe-like vehicles that BMW offers. But it fills a niche that no other manufacturer is filling at the moment. We don't see an entry-level 2-door vehicle from Mercedes or from Audi. but we do from BMW. So if you're looking for something that's a little bit nicer than a Mustang or a Camaro, but doesn't cost that much more and gives you the German precision that you might be looking for, perhaps a tiptoe into a luxury brand, this is a really excellent option. Price tag-wise, it is well within the price range of a Mustang, a Camaro, a Challenger, or even that Supra, which is, of course, a BMW Z4 also, and definitely within the price range of a Nissan Z. If you're looking for a fun-to-drive two-door vehicle, and especially if you want all-wheel drive, something that we don't find on mainstream two-door vehicles like the Mustang or Camaro, the 2 Series is going to be a great option. If you live in a part of the country that gets snow in the winter, you might want to take a look at the 2 Series over some of the mainstream options simply because of the availability of all-wheel drive. It's really going to make the difference between seeing your two-door vehicle as a fair-weather vehicle only or being able to drive it all year round because we have the added traction of all-wheel drive. Now, if my cash were on the line, I have to say I would be pretty hard-pressed to choose between an Audi RS3 and the BMW 2 Series. If I had to pick a two-door vehicle, however, the 2 Series would certainly be towards the top of my list. It's a lot less expensive than the TT, and it feels a lot fresher than the other two-door vehicle in the luxury segment that we didn't talk about, which would be the Infiniti Q60. Now, the reason I didn't talk about the Q60 or the Lexus RC is because they're bigger. They're designed to compete with the 4 Series, although price-wise, the Q60 is perhaps a little bit closer to the 2 Series, it's still in that larger category. So it doesn't give you the same level of fun, the same sort of proportions, or the same look that we find in the 2 Series. Again, if my cash were on the line, however, I probably would get the Audi RS3. It's not because it's more precise than the 2 Series. It certainly doesn't have that traditional rear-wheel drive feel, but the RS3 is just crazy amounts of fun and just a little bit more insane, I would say, than the M240i. Let me know what you think about all that down there in the comment section. And of course, if you have not checked out Brian's quick take, be sure and check out that video as well. There's going to be a link down there in the description. I'll see all of you later.